This is Ken Roselle. This is the PowerPoint presentation for the agenda item regarding implementation of specific provisions of the Court of Appeals decision regarding the city treasurer for the February 18th, 2025 meeting. The recommendation is laid out as follows. It's a recommendation that the City Council approve the first reading by title only and waive further reading of an ordinance entitled An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Oxnard amending specific provisions of the Oxnard City Code to transfer the duties relating to the collection of fees and taxes from the city treasurer to the police chief and modify the procedure for the payment of demands, warrants, and checks so that certain duties held by the city treasurer are transferred to the assistant treasurer. There is an alternative which is listed but not recommended by staff. To direct staff to return with the necessary proposed ordinance and resolution to reorganize and reinstate the duties of city treasurer, so the person in that position will serve as the administrative head of staff now associated with the separate division of billing and licensing and as a department head. There is a brief executive summary. Back in 2020, the city council removed city treasurer Philip Molina as the administrative head. After an independent investigation confirmed the complaints of city staff that Molina had, among other things, violated city's sexual harassment anti-bullying policies by making inappropriate and impermissible comments regarding female employees' appearance, attire, and roles in the workplace, by using keyboard warfare, and accused an improperly investigated employee for theft when no theft had occurred, and for interfering with the investigation. Continuing the executive summary, Molina sued the city, and in 2023, the Superior Court ruled in favor of the city. Molina then appealed that decision and prevailed at the appellate court. The appellate court decision and judgment provided a clear road path for actions the city must take. In addition, the appellate court provided a few options for the city as it relates to modifying the duties of the city treasurer. City staff recommend that the city council adopt an ordinance that makes these changes, as is legally allowed to do, consistent with provisions of state law, the appellate decision, and the judgment in the case. City staff also believe that the recommended adoption of the ordinance is prudent and necessary based on findings made by the 2020 independent investigator discussed in more detail below. Here's some more detailed background. Molina was elected city treasurer in 2016 when the position had two separate and distinct functions: statutory duties and administrative duties. In 2016, just after his election, Molina signed a letter that specifically informed him that then city manager Greg Nyoff had assigned all administrative duties and that these duties included management of the city's treasurer department. And noting that state law does not require that the city treasurer perform these duties. Instead, they are assigned by city management. Here's an outline of some of the misconduct allegations and investigation of Molina. Back in December of 2018, Molina was reprimanded for improper email practices and for violating the city's code of conduct. In August of 2019, employees accused Molina of harassment, bullying, and overstepping his role as city treasurer, which prompted internal investigation. During that time period, in September of 2019, Molina publicly named a complainant and held a staff meeting, which some perceived as an act of intimidation. The process was investigation was in effect for more than 5 months, an interview of 41 employees, and a review of extensive documentation. This slide outlines the findings of the investigator. The investigator found Molina engaged in misconduct for 7 of the 9 matters, based upon a preponderance of the evidence. This slide outlines the steps taken by the city council following the investigation. Most actions were taken on May 5th. Some occurred later in that month and the following month. So they include the adoption of ordinance 2977, resolutions 15, 324, and 325, and adoption of the budget that established a separate Department of Billing and Licensing that included 19 positions and funding that was previously associated with the city treasurer's office. That was done in order to remove all supervisorial duties from the city treasurer. Molina filed litigation on June 2nd, 2021. Judge Burrell, after a number of pleadings, motions, he ruled in favor of the city and city manager on February 14th, 2023. Molina appealed, and on August 7th, 2024, the appellate court issued its decision, an unpublished decision. The appellate court overruled Judge Burrell's decision. The city petitioned for further review by the California Supreme Court. After the court declined to review the case, the matter was sent back to the trial court for entry of the final judgment. Burrell subsequently entered judgment and the writ of mandate in the case on January 29th, 2025. So what are the next steps, if any? While the court ruled that that specific ordinances and resolutions challenged by Molina were void, that decision and the judgment provided a clear roadmap for specific actions that the city is authorized to take as it relates to modifying the duties of the city treasurer in the future. So let's discuss those now. As it relates to the collector duties, the city has the discretion to designate the police chief or chief of police as the collector or the license collector for a number of the licensing and permitting functions. This is based on the authority in Government Code Section 41607, which is based on a law first adopted back in 1883. The assignment of such duties is prudent and necessary based on the findings of the independent investigators. As such, the city staff recommended the city council adopt an ordinance which accomplishes that. Their next steps include issues associated with warrants and checks. The appellate court concluded that the transfer of these duties from the city treasurer to another official was authorized by law. They then cited various provisions of the government code, and in the writ of mandate and final judgment, the court, citing language from government code section 53910, said the city in its discretion may establish its own procedure for the payment of warrants to the extent allowed by law. Staff recommends that the city council amend Oxnard City Code section 2184, 2-184, and 2-186 to make clear that the assistant city treasurer, instead of the city treasurer, is the person authorized to oversee the processing and payment of warrants and checks. This slide outlines what the court ordered on January 29, 2025, in the judgment. This next slide outlines additional directions by the court. Excuse me, there you go. And then this slide starts the analysis of how the city can comply with this judgment. So if the city council introduces and adopts the ordinance recommended by staff, and such ordinance goes into effect, the city would be in compliance with the judgment and the writ of mandate. So here's the basis for that. So as stated in the judgment entered by Judge Burrell on May 7th, 23 was vacated. There's no city action required for this to occur. It was vacated by the judgment. The same thing with the writ of mandate number 2. The judgment also held ordinance number 2977 is void and unenforceable. That judgment clearly invalidated. The proposed ordinance also would repeal ordinance number 2977. Judgment also invalidates Oxnard City Code Section 2-44C, which was adopted as part of ordinance number 2643. The proposed ordinance also repeals this code section as well to make clear that it's no longer in effect. The judgment also declares Oxnard Resolution number 15324 is void and unenforceable. The proposed ordinance also indicates that this ordinance has been repealed, but the judgment clearly invalidated both 15324 and 15325, which is outlined in item 6. 7 talks about how his duties as treasurer are restored, and then the city also outlines how it would be in compliance as outlined below. So first is the compensation. The city has complied with paying Molina his back pay. That occurred on September 20th, 2024. He received almost $449,000, and he started receiving his annual salary of $140,979.90, which was his salary as of December 2020, and that was effective going back to August 7th, 2024. Judgment also required that a writ of mandate issue that commands respondent to take certain actions. These are parallel to what we just discussed as it relates to ordinance number 2977, Oxnard City Code Section 2-44C, Resolution 15324 and 325. And as far as the statutory duties, let's go over those now. You have Government Code Section 41001 about the treasurer is to receive and safely keep all money the treasurer receives. Assuming the ordinance is adopted, the city treasurer would still have the statutory duty, but consistent with the state law, the proposed ordinance would transfer the collector duties, i.e. the party who's collecting the money, receiving the money, that would go to the chief of police. As to item 5B, Government Code Section 41002, Subdivision A, this relates to the deposit and securing of public funds and handling trust funds in possession. The city treasurer would still have the statutory duty, but as we just discussed, the collector duties would be held by the chief of police. On this next item, item C, Government Code Section 41003, paying out money on warrants signed by legally designated persons, and also references Government Code Section 53910, which says the city may in its discretion establish its own procedure for the payment of warrants to the extent allowed by law. So with the adoption of the proposed ordinance and the city council's prior adoption of resolution number 15784 on June 4th, 2024, the city has established its own procedure for the payment of warrants and checks. Item D on this page is a reference to Government Code Section 41004, which to submit the city clerk at least once each month a written report and accounting of all receipts, disbursements, and fund balances, and to file a copy of each report with the city council. The city has instituted the transmittal of the monthly report to the city council and the city clerk. This is based on a separate litigation filed by Moving Oxnard Forward. So the city has taken these affirmative steps to ensure this has happened. Such reports are available online, and the city's information is searchable and downloadable on this website. This information is also provided to the city treasurer, who can transmit this information to the city council as well, consistent with these provisions. As outlined in this PowerPoint, the city has had disagreements with Molina regarding the formatting information provided in the monthly reports, but the format was found acceptable by the court in the Moving Oxnard Forward litigation. Finally, the duties of Government Code Section 41005 relative to the collection of city taxes and license fees as prescribed by ordinance. The judgment also said the city may in its discretion transfer those duties as authorized by law. So with the proposed transfer of the collector duties to the chief of police pursuant to the proposed ordinance, the city treasurer would not have any duties relative to the collection of city taxes and license fees as prescribed by laws. Those would be handled by the city treasurer. As we talked about before, although not the city staff's recommendation, the city council has ability to simply return all pre-2020 duties to the elected city treasurer and to not transfer the collector duties to the chief of police. If that's the council's direction, staff would return with implementing resolution ordinance. However, such action would likely trigger substantial issues as were outlined in the 83-page report by the independent investigator that was dated February 10th, 2020. Finally, our staff recommendation, which we have discussed before, staff recommends that the city council approve the first reading by title only and waive further reading of an ordinance entitled an ordinance of the city council of the city of Oxnard amending specific provisions of the Oxnard City Code to transfer the duties relating to the collection of fees and taxes from the city treasurer to the police chief and modify the procedure for the payment of demands, warrants, and checks so that certain duties held by the city treasurer are transferred to the assistant city treasurer. This ends this PowerPoint presentation.